Right, hello everyone, and welcome to the first ever video presentation for the Northwest Atlantic Vulnerability Hub. Over the next couple of months, we're hoping to bring you a different talk every other Friday from researchers all across North America and further afield that are working on vulnerability in one aspect or another. You can either join us live every other Friday, which gives you the chance to ask the speakers some questions and have a bit of a discussion with our other members. Or you can watch the videos whenever you get the time, as every presentation will later be uploaded to our website and our YouTube channel. Also, later in the year, we will announce some interactive workshops and discussion sessions to get people working together on some common problems and solutions regarding vulnerability assessments. And lastly, if you ever do wish to attend these talks live, can I just remind people to mute their microphones and turn off their cameras until the end of the presentation, but to turn them back on again if you wish to ask the speaker, or even the audience a question at the end. Right, so I have the honor of going first. So for those that do not know me yet, my name is Leigh Howarth and I work for the Centre for Marine Applied Research, or CMAR for short. And just in case you haven't heard of us, we are a research agency that provides science advice on fisheries and aquaculture management within Nova Scotia. And today I'd like to talk to you about an ongoing project we're currently working on, which aims to assess the vulnerability of the Nova Scotian seafood industry to climate change, as well as the coastal communities these industries support. And although I'm the one doing all the talking, this work is very much a team effort between several of us at CMAR and Perennia as well. So for the last 6 months, CMAR have been writing a large, comprehensive report reviewing all the evidence on all the ways that climate change might affect the Nova Scotian seafood industry and coastal communities. And for this, we read over 300 papers and engaged with a huge diversity of scientists and federal and provincial agencies and fishing industry representatives. And I guess the first question we had was, how exactly is climate change affecting the oceans around Nova Scotia? Well, due to global warming and changes in ocean currents, the Gulf of Maine is currently warming much faster than the global average. Likewise, the Scotian Shelf and the Gulf of St. Lawrence are also warming much faster than the rest of Canada. In fact, 3 of the 5 warmest years on record have occurred in the last 8 years. And some models predict that sea surface temperatures could increase by as much as 4 degrees by 2050, which is just 30 years from now. As temperatures increase, sea levels are rising, and again, this is happening even faster in Nova Scotia, as the Nova Scotian landmass has slowly been sinking into the ocean ever since the last ice age. And as a result, sea levels are rising by around 3 millimeters every single year. And models predict that sea levels could increase by a further 150 to 150 centimeters by the end of this century. And to put that into context, just 10 centimeters of sea level rise could potentially cause a 3-fold increase in flooding risk. At the same time, wave heights have been increasing since the 1940s, and they could increase by another 40 to 180 centimeters by the end of the century. And both of these trends are increasing coastal erosion and flooding risk, which could cause damage to coastal properties, roads, and fishing wharves. For example, a storm surge caused by Hurricane Juan back in 2003 caused water levels to increase by a record-breaking 1.9 meters in Halifax Harbour. And the resulting flooding caused $300 million worth of damage and for over 800,000 people to lose power for nearly 2 weeks. And under a high emissions scenario, this record high water level is predicted to occur every 5 years by 2060. As for ocean acidification, the oceans have absorbed around 30% of our carbon dioxide emissions, which has caused a 26% increase in acidity, or a drop in pH of around 0.1. And once again, this is occurring even faster in Nova Scotia due to our relatively low water temperatures and high inputs of fresh water. Now, all these facts and figures really are just best guesses based on current science and oceanographic models. And these models describe some really complex, poorly understood processes. And no matter how good our science gets, the future will always remain highly uncertain. But when we take all this research together, it all seems to point in the same direction. That Atlantic Canada is changing, and it's changing fast. But how might these changes affect the fishing industry? Well, in response to ocean warming, lobsters are shifting ever further north and offshore. And this is responsible for the recent boom in lobster catches in Nova Scotia and Maine. However, ocean warming combined with management issues have both been completely disastrous to lobster fisheries in Rhode Island and Connecticut, where the lobster fisheries have effectively collapsed. Now, although our lobster fishery is currently benefiting from climate change, there is a possibility that as lobster continue shifting north, their abundance may decline in the Bay of Fundy and the Gulf of St. Lawrence. At warmer temperatures, lobster also molt more frequently, shedding their shells, and that could explain why the proportion of soft-shelled lobster caught on the south shore of Nova Scotia recently increased by around 10%. And this could potentially develop to be a bit of a problem as softer shells make it easier to damage lobster during transport, and they also have less meat and higher water content, which reduces their quality and value. And finally, there is evidence that climate change is negatively impacting herring and mackerel fisheries, which traditionally supply bait to the lobster and crab fisheries. However, their increasing scarcity has caused the price of bait to increase by around 900%, meaning access to affordable bait is becoming more and more of an issue. Now, things are looking much worse for the snow crab and northern shrimp fisheries, as these species only really survive in very cold temperatures. For example, a marine heat wave in 2012 caused snow crab to essentially disappear on the western Scotian Shelf, and predictions suggest that they might also disappear on the eastern Scotian Shelf by 2070. Similarly, northern shrimp collapsed on the western Scotian Shelf during a warm period in the 1970s, and it's expected that ocean warming combined with declines in oxygen will negatively impact northern shrimp on the eastern Scotian Shelf and the Gulf of St. Lawrence sometime in the future. As for scallops, well, it could go either way, as lab studies show that ocean acidification can have negative, neutral, and in some cases even positive effects on scallops. And just as confusing, some parts of Nova Scotia are predicted to experience an increase in scallops, whilst other areas are predicted to experience a decrease. So it's a bit of a mixed bag, and I'd say that further investigation is required. But what about finfish? Well, unfortunately, climate change is expected to negatively impact a wide range of species, including herring, mackerel, cod, haddock, pollock, redfish, tuna. Strangely, swordfish are expected to decrease pretty much around the globe, but they might increase very slightly in Nova Scotia. And in fact, there are many other warm water species currently expanding into Nova Scotia, like the American John Dory, spotted tinselfish, black-belly rosefish, the black sea bass. And a lot of these species have commercial potential and already have markets in Europe and the USA. In fact, some industry representatives here in Nova Scotia have already submitted license applications to catch several of these species, so the industry are already looking forward. However, initiating a new fishery is extremely complicated and expensive because in order to get a license from DFO, the fishing industry have to do all the scientific research and cover all the costs themselves, and that requires a huge investment of time and money. And we spoke to several members of the Nova Scotian fishing industry who had recent experience with initiating new fisheries, and all of them found the process to be unbearably complicated, inconsistent, slow, prone to stalling for undetermined periods of time, and to be heavily under-resourced and under-prioritized by DFO. So overall, I would say that we need a much more flexible fisheries management system that can respond to climate change and respond to new and emerging fishing opportunities in a more timely fashion. However, I should also say that DFO are currently revising the process for initiating new secondary fisheries, so hopefully there will be some improvements soon. Now, there are also several other barriers to fisheries adaptation in Nova Scotia. Firstly, the industry here is highly economically dependent on just 4 species: lobster, shrimp, snow crab, and scallop. And these species make up over 85% of all fisheries value in Nova Scotia, and all 4 of them are undergoing changes in response to ocean warming, acidification, and other consequences of climate change. Not only that, but some of the most valuable fisheries are limited entry, meaning fishermen have to invest hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions of dollars to gain a fishing license just to catch a single species. And this, combined with the high value of shellfish fisheries, makes it far less likely that a fisherman is going to take a gamble and sell and purchase a new license to catch a different species, let alone try and undergo the often painful process of initiating a new secondary fishery with DFO. And lastly, fishing licenses are often spatially and seasonally restricted, meaning fishermen are only allowed to fish specific areas during certain times of the year. However, climate change is impacting the productivity, distribution, the timing of molting, and a load of other key life stages of many fisheries in Nova Scotia. So this restraint, combined with all the other barriers we mentioned, they really lock the fishing industry into the status quo, and it weakens their ability to be flexible and adapt to the changes brought about by climate change. So it's clear that the seafood industry and coastal communities are set to experience a large number of changes over the next 30 to 80 years. And anticipating and planning for these changes, oh, sorry about that, will likely be less disruptive to communities and businesses and be a more effective use of public funds than trying to react to these changes after they occur. For example, if we repair coastal infrastructure before it's damaged, it will likely cost far less in the long run. Likewise, identifying which fisheries will be negatively impacted by climate change and helping the industry to adapt before the fisheries decline will also have less of an impact. So it's really important to begin planning for these changes now rather than later. And vulnerability assessments might help us to achieve this by identifying which communities or sectors are the most at risk of climate change, which could allow us to prioritize adaptation efforts to those that are most at risk. Now, over the rest of the summer, we're going to talk a lot more about vulnerability assessments, but very quickly, in general, vulnerability assessments are based on three components: exposure, adaptive capacity, and sensitivity. And these three components are then combined to form an overall index of vulnerability. And we hope to use this kind of approach to measure the vulnerability of our seafood industry and coastal communities. And that way we can work with our federal and provincial agencies, the municipalities, and the seafood industry to help direct adaptation efforts to those sectors and the communities that need it the most. And so far, we've secured 1 year's worth of funding, but we hope to expand this into a larger 3-year project if we get funding from an external source. And that would allow us to bring on some specialized members of staff, like an engineer and a fisheries economist. So that's all from me for now. If you want to know even more information on this report, including how aquaculture could be affected by climate change, our full report is now online on our website, along with several other fishing and aquaculture industry relevant projects in Nova Scotia. So check us out at www.cmar.ca. And thank you so much to everyone involved in this project so far. And thank you to you all for listening. Thank you very much.